and staff, and we have our new finance manager in the boardroom with us today, Jim Zaffino. I'd like to refer over to CIO Newell just to say a few words.
Oh, thanks, Madam Chair. So everybody knows that Mr. Curving left us a couple weeks ago, and that is a bad time for any manager of finance to leave an organization with local government, because on the calendar year we are right into budget, and in our organization, manager of finance does the budget. So I called up Mr. Zaffino, an old friend of mine, both ways, I guess, literally and age-wise. We're in the same demographic, and asked him to do the interim work. And when we got him here, we said we weren't going to let him go. So he has agreed to take the job permanently. Started with us this week, and I know the board will be willing to let him at least get his feet on the ground and get oriented before you start bombarding him with your questions. But I know the window is short on that as well, and so does he. So, Mr. Zaffino, professional accountant with a CGA background, worked for the city for a long time, has worked previously with the regional district of Okanagan-SIMILKAMEEN, went up to West Kelowna as CFO when it incorporated, took over as CAO for the past 6 years, and has most recently been consulting in the local government field. So a wealth of experience, knows our systems, in fact developed a lot of them that we're still using, and we're just really excited to have him on board, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you very much. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you.
We're really
Mr. Zaffino was well trained in Penticton, so you've got a lot of a good man here that's going to last a long time. I've known him for a long time personally, and I know he's a good man. You guys made the right choice to hire him for the RDOS. Welcome back, Mr. Zaffino.
Yes, thank you, John. And Jim used to work here too.
Yeah.
So he knows our system of financial planning and budgeting, and as well as municipal planning and budgeting. So an excellent asset to our team. So we're very lucky to have him join us at this time of year. Can I just remind everybody out there to make sure you keep yourselves on mute until you're ready to speak. We do get some feedback from some folks. So that being said, I'm going to turn things over to Chair Pendergraft for Planning and Development.
Good morning, everybody. We'll call the Planning and Development Committee meeting to order, and looking for a motion to approve the agenda. Moved, seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. First item up is zoning bylaw amendment for the electoral areas concerning solar energy. CAO.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So this started out in Naramata, as many of our problems do, with a pole-mounted solar installation, and some of these now are getting intrusive into neighborhoods, and we have no rules really around pole-mounted solar installations. So administration was directed to start looking at what would be acceptable, and I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Garish, Madam Chair, but he has been doing some work on this and has some suggestions that he wants some feedback from the board on. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
I was just about to say it's a
Okay.
mister.
Do we have Mr. Darish online there? Okay, go ahead, Chris. If we can see him.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my PowerPoint presentation up here. I'm not able to share any content here, Danny. Are you able to?
Do you want to introduce the young man behind you, Chris?
Sure. So for those who may not know, on my right, probably your left, is Rushi Godoya. He's our planning technician. And Rushi is the one who did all the research and put together the report before you today on solar energy systems. And he's also got a presentation that he's going to run through. If I can just get the the screen up and running here.
It's up.
Perfect. Oops. Oh, shoot. We'll just stick with this view. Great. Over to you, Rishi.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chris, for introducing me. So just presenting today for the solar energy systems proposed amendment bylaw 2911. Okay. So just to give you a bit of a background on what the solar energy systems are, basically it is the form of energy that can be derived from sun and can be used for residential, commercial, industrial purposes. Residential component would be to use it for solar thermal to basically heat things like water, food, and heat and a house. For the commercial and industrial component would be to generate it on a more bigger, wider basis. Would be solar electricity to turn the light energy into form of electricity using solar panels. There are numerous types of solar energy systems, but boiling it down, basically the most common that's used in Okanagan region is roof mounted and ground mounted, as you can see in the photos. To give you a bit of a background on what current regulations are regarding regarding such systems, currently we do not have any zoning or siting regulations regarding such devices. When proposed at the roof mounted, during the building permit stage, it would be incorporated directly into the building design and with no height incentives whatsoever. With the proposed amendments, it is a part of a bigger picture to allow the regional district to go green with the possible alternatives to incorporate alternative forms of energy, and also will allow the opportunity for the regional district to regulate such devices. The issue at hand currently is that these are massive structures and pretty intrusive, and we've received complaints for such structures from neighboring property owners with possible glare and views being blocked. And currently we do not have any regulations, so staff is identifying those regulations for the siting and placement through this proposed amendment. So basically on May 21st, 2020, it was directed by the Regional District Board in light of the issues that we've received, that the Regional District staff identify options for the zoning regulations to incorporate the solar energy devices into the zoning bylaw in a way to allow Regional District to regulate such devices. Based on that, staff identified background research and identified what neighboring municipalities are doing, and work with the building department to see what possible gaps are and how we can approach that. So the proposed amendments at hand currently are to define solar energy devices into the zoning regulations, to establish minimum parcel size of 1 hectare, to install ground-mounted systems except for industrial and administrative and institutional zones, and to introduce height regulations into the zoning bylaw to allow the regional district with an ability to regulate such devices, and in all way ensure that ground-mounted systems are not sited within the setbacks area. The first amendment, which is the introducing a minimum parcel size of 1 hectare, this would allow the regional and at the same time the property owner to ensure that adequate land space is available to facilitate separation of such uses. And it would also encourage the property owners, it wouldn't discourage the property owners from pole-mounted devices, but encourage when parcel size is less than 1 hectare to opt for roof-mounted devices. The second proposed amendment, which is height regulations, can be categorized for roof and roof and pole mounted or ground mounted. For roof mounted, from the study, it was identified that it is generally roof mounted devices are tilted, and the best angle would be 30 degrees to optimize the amount of solar energy that can be generated from the sun. And staff is proposing that the regional district allow additional 1 meter height and which exceeds the maximum permitted building height. So let's say if a building is 10 meters, to allow additional 1 meter and incorporate that into the building into the zoning bylaw. The third amendment, which is proposing height regulations for the ground-mounted devices, staff identified, and this is again keeping in with studies identified with the neighboring municipalities and all around municipalities in Canada, to when height is less than accessory building or height of the accessory building in that given zone, it meets all the siting and zoning regulations of that accessory building for that particular zone. In second scenario, when height exceeds the height of the accessory building, staff is requiring that it be located at a distance at least twice of its height. And again, this is all keeping in with what the neighboring municipalities are doing, but in no case it shall exceed the maximum height allowed for principal buildings allowed in that zone. Just to give you a background, these devices can range anywhere between 3 to 7 meters, and these zoning regulations or proposed amendments would help regional district to regulate such devices. The part of a bigger picture, it would be the next steps would be to take this to public to receive their input on this and come back to the board with a more concrete regulations, and if there are any changes for the first and second reading. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Is there any questions
Sure.
on the proposals? I see some hands. I'll start with Director Bush and then go to the others. Go ahead.
So if you had just a little bit less than a hectare, would we be allowed a variance to it? Or?
Correct. Yeah. So that is the option which would allow the regional district to regulate such devices, and at the same time it would incorporate communities consultation. So that is the approach that we are taking.
The other,
Go ahead.
sorry, would the ALR or ALC have any jurisdiction as well over solar panels on agriculture land?
No, not that I'm aware of. No.
Okay, I'll go to Director Knodel and then Director Gettins.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about this. 1 hectare in land, just so we understand, is roughly the size of 12 urban lots. So we're saying that you have to mount on your house or go for a variance. Of all the projects that we have out there, of all the programs that we should be trying to streamline and move forward with rapidly, solar power should have the least encumbrances on it. This doesn't really fit rural areas. This type of legislation, I think, is better suited to an urban environment. What you propose is fine if they're flat, but 60% of the buildings, the lots, especially the larger acreage lots, are on hillsides in my area, and I believe in Director Pendergraft also, and probably most of the rural areas around here. So, you know, if you were going to set the lot or the height, it would be better set it to height above the ground as opposed to above the level of the building. Quite often the buildings are built on the lowest point of the ground just because access in winter becomes an issue. In best case scenario, I would want to see this go to a public consultation. I don't think the way it's written that it would go over very well in this area. And every encumbrance that we put on this adds another cost to a program that's already very difficult for people of lesser means to incorporate. The lifespan on a solar panel is around 20 years, and then they have to be replaced. So this is not something that you put up and it lasts forever either. So at least a public consultation. Other than that, I'm not in favor of it at all, the way it's written. It doesn't fit rural areas, in my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, Director Gettins?
Thank you, through the chair. I'm just curious if there's any studies done or anything around consumer preference between the ground mounted model and the roof mounted model. I think the ground mounted, from what I understand, the preference is because they can move it around and make the most use out of it. So I'm just curious if there's a cost difference between the two different systems, or if there's a consumer preference between the two different systems.
Currently, we don't know, and that's why we are approaching a community consultation as the next step to see what the consumer preference is.
Okay, I will go to Director Bob Coyne and then Director Holmes.
Yeah, I think Director Knoebel kind of summed it up for me. I think we got enough in the rural areas. We've got enough, if not too many, regulations already, and I think this is just another one that's going to get in the way. I can see it having setbacks in residential areas, but not in large holdings and such. That's it.
Okay, thank you for that. Director Holmes?
Yeah, thank you. So I noted that you tried possible with the member municipalities. I'm just wondering, when you researched the other municipalities, was there consistency amongst the municipalities in their approach, or did you find differences amongst the different member municipalities?
Yeah, so mostly there was consistency, but most of the municipalities that I researched, Summerland, Penticton, and other neighboring municipalities do not have any regulations for pole mounted. And that's why this approach is a new one.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll go to Did you have another question, Director Holmes, or no? Okay, Director Kazakovich, and then down to Director Spencer Coyne.
Right, thank you. Yeah, so I brought this forward, and I don't think that it's necessarily going to be something that would work for all electoral areas. It was brought forward when you look from your property or your deck, and 20 feet away is a giant stand-up solar panel in your face. That's where the issue is. So when you have small lots, residential lots, and someone puts that up immediately beside your house, beside your deck, your backyard, your front yard, that's the issue for me. So I do think it needs some tweaking, and it may really not fit all electoral areas. It may be something that's more appropriate for possibly DE, F, and I, or maybe it's just Area E, but we do have areas, for example, Area D, Heritage Hills. I mean, if your neighbor just right next door threw up one of these giant standalone solar panels, I don't think you'd be really pleased to see that immediately next door to your house. So that is my concern, that we have some sort of regulations to that help prevent that from happening. We can certainly hear from people, and I have heard that it devalues your property to suddenly have that pop up and block your view. So I would like to hear what the citizens have to say about this, and whether this might be something we need to skew down to just certain electoral areas. Thank you.
Okay, Director Coyne.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to agree with the other Director Coyne and Director Knoebel, but I also agree with Director Kazakovich, and I think this is a area specific rather than across the entire district. So, thanks.
Thanks for that, Director Johansson.
Thank you, Chair Pendergraft. Not having been here at when the notice of motion came through on May 21st, I'm wondering the type of complaints that the board has received, or the RDOS has received regarding solar panels, and if there's been lots of them. And my other concern about this is just the application process. How is there going to be an expectation going forward that a resident or a property owner is going to have to make application, and how that application is going to be reviewed? Is there going to be a permit fee associated with it, and the follow-up enforcement of the whole regional district raises a few concerns for me.
Okay, can staff answer the question in regards to how it would be handled permit-wise?
So currently we received one complaint that was specific to electoral area E, and the complaint was for just the views being blocked and concerns for the reflective glare.
And then for the other part of the question, I just add that we don't envision there being any specific application requirements to install a solar energy system. The only exception would be is if the board sets regulations for minimum parcel size requirements for the larger pole-mounted ones. Potentially there could be DVPs related to that, but not for the installation of the system itself after planning approvals are obtained.
Okay, so there's no application process then. Okay, were there any other questions? I do see a hand at Director Holmes, or is that a leftover? Okay. Seeing no further questions, is there a direction from the board on this? No.
Well, Rick's got a hand up.
Director Cannoli?
I'd like to see us abandon this.
Okay. Is that a motion or
That's a motion, sir.
maybe we should,
What did he say?
he would like to see it abandoned.
But is that a motion?
He said it is. Is there a seconder for that? I can't see all the hands, but
Can I just add, Mr. Chair? So for the new members, in committees, everybody votes,
yes.
right? So incorporated community representatives as well.
Sabrina has a hand up.
Director Monteith. I see your hand up. Is that for seconding?
No, I have another motion.
Okay. Before I go to you, I'll just ask Director Coyne, was that hand for seconding it?
So get out on the floor and discuss it.
Okay, so that first motion to abandon the bylaws is moved and seconded.
Sorry.
Is there any discussion on that?
Well,
I seen a hand, Director Gettens.
Thank you, through the chair. I don't think we should abandon it. I won't support that. I do think we need to allow the public to weigh in on this.
Okay, Director Kozakovich?
yeah, same comment as Director Gettens. I don't think we're doing a service to our citizens who have had concerns to just abandon it. I think we should be going out and asking the public's opinion, and maybe that is a new motion that skews this down to specific electoral areas, if that's the case.
Okay, I will go to Director Monteith and then Holmes.
And to the chair, that's exactly, Carla, what I was going to suggest, that maybe we scale it down to the consultation to the areas that we know may be more interested than others. Thank you.
Comments? Those hands are going around all over the place there. Director Holmes.
Yeah, same thing. Really, I don't think the areas that don't think it's important should hold back the areas that do think it's important. So we could amend it and to those areas who do want it.
Okay, Director Johansson.
Thank you. My comments would be similar. Well, my support for the zoning bylaw amendment may not be the strongest. I think public consultation is important to have that process follow through and then make some decisions later on whether we should move forward with this amendment.
Okay. Are there any other hands up there, or the Holmes is a leftover, I'm assuming? Seeing none, we will have to call the question on this. So all those in favor of abandonment, please raise your hands. So we've got Director Knodel and Coyne. If those hands could come down, we'll get opposed. Appears that motion is defeated. Do we need all those names, Christy, or
No.
just the two that were in favor and you can figure it from there? Okay, direction on this? Secondary motion, Director Kazakovich?
Sure, I'll move that the administrative recommendation, but for electoral areas D, E, F, and I, that we reach out for public consultation.
Okay, seconder on that. I see a couple of hands. Director Monteith, that was the second, I'm assuming? Okay, it's on the floor. Discussion. We've kind of discussed it. Unless there's anybody else who wanted to become listed in there, you could amend that motion quickly. Otherwise, we will call the question. All those in favor? Okay, hands could come down. Opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. Brings us to the second item on the agenda, which has to do with the metal shipping containers. CAO.
This was also a request from the board previously, Mr. Chair, is that we look into what we do with metal storage containers in areas we don't have any rules around those. So planning has done their research and they've come up with some suggestions just for the Okanagan Valley. So this would not apply anywhere where we don't have a zoning bylaw like B and most of G, nor does it apply to H. So again, we're floating some suggestions for discussion as to what rules should be put around metal storage containers. And, Chris will have a presentation on this.
Okay, I'll go to Mr. Garish again for the presentation.
Get my PowerPoint up here. Sorry. Do it this way again. So just to give a quick overview of the current zoning bylaw as it relates to storage containers. So they are silent on shipping containers. Staff have been interpreting these in the past as accessory buildings or structures. And of course, accessory buildings and structures are permitted in basically all of our zones. And we've also interpreted them to have to comply with the specified height, setback, and parcel coverage regulations for an accessory building or structure in that particular zone. And in terms of how we've seen shipping containers used in the past, this is an example of an industrial use in Area C where they were stacked to provide structural support for a roof over an industrial operation. But we also see shipping containers storage containers used in relation to residential uses, either as habitable space, which is on the left, or the right, which is just outright storage of household goods or equipment, either on the parcel, beside the existing house, etc. So, I mean, I've got this slide as issues, but I suppose what makes storage containers popular as a building on properties is their versatility and ease of use. There are concerns, however, about the aesthetic impact in a neighborhood. Sometimes there's concerns about the safety, particularly when shipping containers may or may not be targeted for break-ins. And I know the building inspectors have also raised concerns in the past about building code compliance and how the containers are being used. So, you know, as we usually do with these sorts of requests for regulation, we looked at other local government approaches in the valley. And for the most part, they are fairly uniform. Stacking of containers is limited to no more than 2. Universally seem to be excluded from residential zones. We were aware of prohibitions about placing containers between a principal building, i.e. dwelling, and the street. And again, that's for aesthetic considerations, we assume. ensuring that containers aren't placed on required parking spaces, and in some instances, and I think this is more for industrial zones, potentially limiting the number of containers per parcel, and the example here being no more than 10. So we had actually been to the board previously in 2017 because storage containers and their use does crop up routinely, not necessarily in the form of complaints, but people calling in to query if their neighbors can do this, or how many are they allowed to do, what kind of restrictions are in place. And so we had direction from 2017 to incorporate it into the new single bylaw. But the board brought it forward again earlier this year, specifically in relation to Area I, but we do see this as a regional-wide issue, so that's why we're looking at it beyond just the one electoral area. And as I recall, the issue that brought it to the fore in Area I was up at Apex. Complaints were coming in relation to containers just being dropped in visually prominent locations, not seen to be visually appealing, and potentially being left there for a long time. Now, you can see here in the photos, the ones on the left are your typical, I guess, examples where they've just been dropped and left. Whereas the one on the right, somebody's actually made an attempt to try to at least conceal it within or with the building of the principal dwelling unit. So following the direction from the board, we did draft up Amendment Bylaw 2895. The original proposal to the board was to have containers permitted in the resource area, agriculture, large holdings, and industrial zones, but not the residential. We had a regulation limiting the stacking to no more than 2, clarifying compliance with zoning regs for siting, i.e. setbacks and height for accessory structures. And then also introducing an exception for a temporary allowance during construction on a property where a building permit's been issued, because of course we recognize that materials and equipment are stored in these during construction at times. So the committee considered this in March and gave staff direction to go forward with some changes. And so the changes that came out of committee were to include small holding zoned parcels and also low density residential, i.e. the RS zones, as being suitable for the placement of shipping containers. But in allowing them into those smaller zones, the board requested that a provision for cladding and roofing that was consistent with the principal dwelling in order to help them blend in be applied to the containers in the small holdings and low density zones. The stacking of containers at 2 was kept, compliance with siting was kept, temporary allowance for construction was kept. So following that direction, we went out into consultation. Because of COVID, we did consult with the APCs, but it wasn't in a group setting, it was individually with feedback forms provided back to us by the APC members. Agency referrals were sent out, a notification on the regional district webpage, social media accounts, and also Civic Ready. And we tried to give, we did get a fair number of responses, which are in your agenda. We tried to summarize some of those in the report for you, including the comments that came in, but I've said here in the first dot point, there's many caveats to that, and it was actually a bit of a challenge just because of the way people approached their comments. 3 to 1 were in favor of storage containers, but there was a lot of caveats to that in terms of conditions that they wanted to see attached. And it wasn't clear to us when we were going through those if those conditions couldn't be met, if they still supported it or not. So it was a challenging consultation process to summarize in that way. As you'll see in the table in your report, the majority of representations did come in from electoral area A, primarily the Anarchist Mountain area. And we did receive 20 comments from APC members, and those were spread, generally fairly evenly across the electoral areas. There was a number of issues that were raised, and I'm going to go through these in individual slides quickly, cognizant of time here, but just a quick summary of the issues. What zones should be allowed in? Is the building permit exemption appropriate? Would be other exemptions for moving? People did have a lot of comments or things to say about the cladding and the roofing. A lot of people also brought up grandfathering, primarily in relation to making the existing containers have to comply with whatever new regs the board may choose to implement. And then finally, some comments about setbacks. So in response to the summary comments, the comments received that spoke to the zones that they should be allowed in, again, I want to reemphasize that none of our member municipalities currently allow them in their residential zones. So we are kind of an outlier there. That proposal was opposed by some residents, but it was also supported by others. We recognize that. There was an alternate suggestion put forward in a number of the representations received about, instead of relying on parcel zoning, that a parcel size consideration be suggested for. So for discussion purposes, we're recommending that the board potentially look at 0.5 of a hectare minimum requirement in the RS and SH zones in order to allow the placement of a container. That's the recommendation before you today. In relation to the exemption for building permits, there were a number of comments too that residents were concerned that the duration of construction can sometimes last years. And if the exemption is tied to the building permit, that could allow for the storage container then to be on the property for years. And there was a suggestion that that should be more time limited, either to 6 to 12 months. At a staff level, though, we are concerned about that because that it's an arbitrary number and it's unrelated to the scale or the complexity of the building project. And it could put us into the awkward situation of having to issue DVPs in order for people to keep a storage container on the property while the construction project is completed. So, I mean, we appreciate people's concerns about the open-ended nature of building permits sometimes, but we recommended that no action be taken on this comment. Although when it came to the other exemption request, which was an allowance for the storage of household goods while moving, we do feel that there's merit in that. The short-term allowance should be provided when people are moving, and we are recommending that the board allow for that in the regulations. The cladding and roofing one is an interesting one. A lot of people did support this. There's also comments that didn't. Specifically, they felt it was onerous in terms of cost, the need for additional materials. Some people question the potential skills of the people putting the cladding on the containers and whether that might create a hazard. And then it also might, they feel, impact the resale of containers once people were done with them. There was an alternate suggestion put forward, which we think might actually have some more merit, especially when we consider that, you know, sometimes the principal dwelling unit might be a log house, or it itself might be clad in metal, in which case an unclad shipping container would then match the house. So rather than require that, we're asking the board to give consideration to potentially only requiring that the shipping container be painted to match the color of the principal dwelling unit. Again, a lot of people raised the grandfathering issue, and I just want to highlight that we're recommending that the board don't take action on this, and that's primarily because non-conforming uses and siting is covered under the Local Government Act, and we can't use a local government bylaw to override that. So we have no way to deal with grandfathering. Although I appreciate people's concerns around that, it's not something that we can do. And I think this might be my last slide. On the setback issues, we had recommended that they simply comply with the setbacks for accessory structures. Some of the comments received pointed out that even complying with the setbacks could still result in storage containers being placed in a very visually prominent location in front of a house that aesthetically might not be appropriate for a neighborhood. So they asked for a little bit more restrictive setback, specifically prohibiting containers between the road frontage and the house, wherever the house may be on the parcel. Obviously, this presents challenges on larger properties where you are going to have the house set back, you know, potentially very significantly distance from the road. So we're recommending that this be considered by the board, but it only be applied on the smaller parcels in the RS and SH zones. And that's it for my presentation. I'm happy to try to answer any questions the board may have.
Okay, I'll start with Director Kazakovich. Her hand came up quick.
Thank you. I have a question about what's recommended, I guess, for aesthetics. My understanding is that many shipping containers are rented, and how can we ask them to paint it if they don't own it? I've never rented or bought one, so I don't know the rules around these containers, but it seems difficult to me if someone has a rented one that we could tell them they have to paint it or clad it or make changes to something they don't own.
Mm-hmm. No, that would certainly present a challenge.
We were looking for a solution there, Chris.
Well, I mean, then this, I guess, just quickly off the top of my head, the solution would be to not require that color matching or cladding with the principal dwelling unit. We just drop it.
Okay, any other questions? I see Director Monteith.
To the chair. So this has really been a concern for Apex. The community up at Apex is truly a village, and the homes are pretty close together. It's a very developed area. And when these shipping containers are popping up, it does, in some ways, provide, as the benefits have stated, you know, there's the benefits of secure storage, all that sort of stuff, but it doesn't fit the alpine feel of the community. And that's what residents are sharing with me, is that, you know, they see and support the need for secure storage, but they don't want the shipping containers to take over. And they're seeing an increase in shipping containers, not only for building, but they're staying there. And it is an issue for the residents of Apex that they feel that this is changing their community. So I know that Apex is interested. When I spoke to residents in Caledon and Twin Lakes, not so much. They want the shipping containers. So, and they were comfortable with them. So it truly is perhaps the size of the land, in areas that are very developed, and with neighbors close by. Those are the ones I think that are more impacted. So I do feel like staff is on the right direction. And I do support it, just because I do hear from my residents that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Cano.
I definitely see some issues with small holdings areas. It looks like we have access for larger properties. One thing that's coming up though is I'm seeing cargo containers that are much smaller, not much larger than current available garden sheds. One thing about these storage containers is they are quite integrally sound. They're impervious to rodents for the most part. They're weather tight, and they're extremely secure. So I've got residents in this area moving towards them, primarily on the security issue, but also finding that they have weather tight security or storage that isn't available with garden sheds, which tend to start looking pretty ratty inside a couple of years. Granted, a storage container can too, but this might not be a one size fits all. I can definitely see where Apex or, you know, tighter communities would really not be too friendly towards them. But there's a change happening with these cargo containers, in that there are a lot of smaller ones now becoming available. You might want to leave a door open there rather than just closing it right away. And yes, that's my comment. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for that. Director Holmes?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about how you envision enforcement, because so what we see in Summerland is that you'll have a temporary, a container will be placed in a residential area on a temporary basis for moving or construction or something like that. But then after that purpose has been completed, the shipping container stays. And because our bylaw, we respond to complaint driven, you have to wait until the neighbors all get it fed up with seeing that shipping container there for a year or two until it's acted upon. And so I'm just wondering how you envision enforcement of these issues, of these regulations.
Mm-hmm. I suspect our enforcement would be very similar in approach to what Summerland does. We are the same. We respond to written complaints. So until such time as neighbors brought it to our attention, we wouldn't be out actively policing these.
Okay, thanks for that. Director Gettins.
Thank you, the chair. I wanted to also echo Director Monteith and Director Knodel. It is so specific to the area. So in Greater West Bench, where we are feeling, where a lot of residents are feeling that there's more and more industrial type work coming, or residents coming into our area, that this is a little bit of a hot button topic. But then you get out to Meadow Valley and Falder, where there's 10 or 20 or greater acre properties, and storage containers really have a good purposeful use there. So I know just the amount of feedback that I got from Area F, I think the staff did a wonderful job of kind of getting this going and wading through it all. So I'd like to move the administrative recommendations so we can get it back to the public and hear what they have to say.
Okay, it's being moved. Is there a seconder? I take it Director Monteith's hand was for seconding? Okay, so the motion is on the floor. Is the discussion still continuing? Anything further? Director Holmes' hand is a leftover, I'm assuming? Okay. I do have one comment on this, and it has to do with, I understood from previous discussions when it came to the planning and development that there would be a building permit application needed to happen for these to be placed. Is that still the plan, Chris? Could you answer that for me?
We're receiving for I'll have to get back to you on that, Director Pendergraft. We just quickly discussing here, we don't regularly or see them at all for building permit zone checks at the moment. So I'd have to confirm with the building inspectors as to how they're going to approach these. I don't think, at least at this point, anything would change on the basis of the zoning regulations. They're really dictated by the building code. And I think it comes down to how it's proposed to use the structure, and really only if it's for residential use, I believe, would that then trigger the need for a building permit.
Okay, that was the comment I wanted to make. I don't think there should be building permit application to place one of these.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of it becoming residential, that's another story. And maybe also if it was going to be stacked, then it's something to consider.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I question is whether there would be the need to actually paint these. And aside from the rental point that Director Kazakovich made, I question the painting on, if you have to match it to the color of the house, in a small property, that's fine. But in the rural area, if you've got a white house, do I really want a white shipping container sitting in the middle of the wood? Then it's really standing out. I would rather it be listed as neutral or a natural color where it kind of hidden then. So maybe we should just not put anything with the painting aspect of it.
Yeah, so if I can just clarify, I think the proposed, well, whether the board chooses to go with the cladding and the roofing, or if it chooses to go with the painting, I believe we're only proposing that on containers placed in the small holdings and RS zones, so the smaller parcel sizes. If you're placing one in a large holdings, ag, or resource area parcel, which is generally going to be above 2 hectares, there wouldn't be that kind of color matching or cladding requirement.
Okay, good clarification. Any further discussion on this? Okay, the motion is the staff recommended motion, if I'm not mistaken here, with the amendments as proposed. Any questions before I call the question? Okay, I will. All in favor? Okay, hands are up. If they could come down, I'll ask for opposed. Seeing none, motion will carry.
Was Director Monteith opposed?
I don't think so. She was one of the ones who wanted this.
Her hand went up.
It was maybe a residual hand. Could I just ask Monteith if that was the case?
It was an error.
Okay, thank you for that. The motion carries, and I believe that concludes our agenda.
That is it.
It does, so we will adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Pendergraft. I'm going to go to CIO Newell now for the hospital board meeting.
So I'll call the Okanagan-Similkameen Regional Hospital District Board of Directors meeting, Madam Chair, and I'm interchanged the order of the agenda. We won't do any motions until we actually get chair. So the reason we put a hospital, typically our hospital board meetings are the second meeting of each month. And we called one this time because the Hospital Districts Act requires that the hospital board have a chair and vice chair. And Section 13 of the Act says that we must hold elections from amongst the directors at the first meeting. So for us, in 2020, our first meeting is going to be November 5th. But the other section that is of interest to us at this point is 13.2, which says that we can appoint acting chair and vice chair for absence or disability. We actually don't have anybody in the chair or vice chair positions right now to be absent or be disabled, because they have both been removed by their councils. So Chair Ventimiglia was removed by Oliver and replaced by the mayor. And recently, Vice Chair Boop has been replaced by the District of Summerlin. So what I'm interpreting then from the Act is that we need to elect a chair and vice chair until we can get to our inaugural meeting on November 5th, at which time we would do our normal elections for both the board of directors for the regional district and for the hospital board. So I'm going to open and because we are doing this electronically, we don't have the capability of a secret ballot. When we do our inaugural meeting on November 5th, we're going to do it at the lakeside, and we'll do the secret ballot as normal. We'll make some other arrangement for those that are going to be attending electronically, but we just didn't have time to do it for this. So I'm afraid for this interim election, you're going to have to show your colors and who you're voting for.
Manfred's up already.
Director Bush.
Can we nominate somebody who's not here?
If they're a member of the board. So a director, you cannot nominate an alternate.
So that leaves Judy out?
Yes.
For 1 month.
Yeah, we're going to do elections for 2021 on November 5th. Right, this is to get us between now and then, and the new chair can either call a meeting on the 15th or not.
So we've got Bauer and Canola.
Okay, so I'm going to open nominations for chair. Director Coyne.
Oh, he's moved.
To nominate Mark Pendergraft.
And would you accept the nomination, Mr. Pendergraft?
I hadn't really considered it.
Think fast.
I don't think so at this time. I appreciate the nomination, though.
Okay.
If it's only temporary, that would be one thing, but I don't really want the job of chair forever.
Was just for a month.
Director Bauer.
We can't hear him for some reason.
Director Bowers.
We can't hear you, Director Bauer.
That's nice.
Can you do sign language?
We can't hear.
Nothing yet.
We've lost you, Director Bauer.
Hold up a sign.
That's frustrating.
Can you handle that, Danny?
I've unmuted him. It's something with his actual computer.
It's
audio.
something, yeah, at your end, Director Bauer, it seems to be.
Follow.
Okay.
He's on the phone as well.
We have Director
Knodel.
I'd nominate Carla Kazakovich as interim chair.
And Director Kazakovich, would you accept the nomination?
I'd be happy to fill in for 1 month, and we may not even have a meeting to do, so definitely I'll fill in.
Okay. I'll call a second time for nominations for the position of chair. Okay. Are you with us, Director Bauer?
It's funny.
No? No, he's not. Okay. Any other nominations? I'll call a third time for nominations for the position of chair for the hospital district. Seeing none, we'll close nominations and declare Director Kazakovich acclaimed.
Oh, thank you, George.
Yes, so we'll have the applause. Yes. I will open nominations for the position of vice chair
I would like.
for the hospital district. Director Kazakovich.
Yes, thank you. I think it would be very fitting that Vice Chair Holmes fill in as the vice chair for hospital, so that both of us just fill in for the 1 month, and then we'll start fresh on November 5th with election.
Director Holmes, would you accept the nomination?
That's that's fine, and I can confirm that I would not be running for the permanent position.
Okay, I'll call a second time for nominations for the position of vice chair.
I see Coyne is up there, Spencer.
Director Coyne, Jr.
No, I said
Yeah, oh, no. I'll call a third time for nominations for the position of vice chair. See any hands? No. Seeing none, we'll close nominations and consider Director Holmes acclaimed for the position of vice chair.
Okay, that was simple.
Good. So I'll turn it over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, folks, having a look at your agendas, I'd like a motion to adopt the agenda, please. Director Pendergraft, thank you. Director Robinson, call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Hands can come down. Anybody opposed? Not seeing any. Thank you. So that's going to take us to item D, which is the minutes, and I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes of September 17th, moved by Director Coyne Sr. and Director Gettens, seconding. Are there any questions, comments, any errors or omissions on those minutes? I'm not seeing any hands up. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Hands can come down. Anybody opposed? Okay, those are carried, and I'm looking for a motion. Oh, yes, go ahead.
So just for information then for the board, at our, well, basically all year, we've been discussing physician recruitment. We got down to the point where we had invited a number of parties, Interior Health and Division of Family Practice, and done some benchmarking about what we wanted to do as far as participating in projects that would assist in physician recruitment. Now, the only opportunity we would have to discuss that prior to the end of this term would be as if we called a hospital district meeting on the 15th. We don't have to, we can just extend that into the next, but I thought maybe you might want to get some instruction from the board as to whether they wanted to deal with that or leave it.
Okay, thank you, CAO. Director Gettens, your hand is up. Go ahead, please.
Chair. Thanks, Chair. I just want to actually, that was perfect timing, CAO. I wanted to just follow up from our last meeting with IH and Division of Family Practice, because we were trying to figure out a process of how to operationalize what we've been talking about for the past year and a half around supporting physician recruitment. And in July, the last meeting, we had a recommendation that staff would develop a policy that provides us a flexible funding model. And then we decided not to do that because we wanted to hear more from IH, and then IH came at the end of September. So if we're going to head into strategic planning and budgeting, I'd like to know the tools of how this possibly could happen to support this, so we know what we're actually discussing and debating. So I would be in favor of having a meeting next week to hear more from staff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did anybody else have any feedback on having a meeting on the 15th or waiting for the new board and new chair and vice chair? Oh, Director Monteith, go ahead, please.
To the chair, I fully support where Director Gettens is going with this. We've been talking about this for a year and a half. Like, I feel like it's time we start making some decisions on where we're moving, especially before budget strategic planning, this is the perfect time for us to start making decisions so we can start making planning for what we're going to do as a region. And I feel like we've had a lot of information, we've had a lot of debate, a lot of discussion. So I think it's time we start moving forward. It's my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So is it the will of the board that you'd like to have a hospital board meeting on October 15th? Is there anybody opposed to or have a different suggestion on whether we have a meeting on the 15th or wait till the November, second meeting in November? Director Gettens, go ahead.
Thank you. I just have a question. If we have a meeting on the 15th, is it possible that staff will have enough time between now and then to get us the information around what a policy would look like? I think that's the information that we're looking for before we head in, well, that some of the board is looking for before we head into strategic planning. So I just wanted to make sure the timing is aligned.
CAO, I think.
We'll put some thought to that, Madam Chair. The policy is a consistent approach to dealing with recurring issues, so I'm not sure how often this would recur. I'm not sure if a policy is the right format, but we definitely have some issues that were raised that could stand some further discussion.
Right, I think we need to determine if we are wanting to move forward, if it's the will of the board that we want to move forward, or if this isn't right for us and we put it to bed as a no. So we really need to decide, because there seems to be a lot of different opinions over the past year and a half with no consensus on how we want to move forward on getting involved financially in primary care. Let's hear from some others, though. I've got Director Coyne Sr., please.
Yes, I guess this question's for Bill. Did we ever actually find out or figure out if we're legally allowed to do this as a hospital board, or that seemed to be the big question for the longest time?
My understanding is we would have to have a project that's designated as a hospital under the Hospital Act in order to contribute financially. So we could explore what that means. But the reason I hesitated about a policy is I know when we were discussing a policy, we were talking about maybe we can just set up a reserve and give grants to various organizations who could assist in physician recruitment. And I don't think without actually having something that is designated as a hospital, I don't think we could contribute funds liberally without that designation by the ministry. So those are the questions we'll have to research.
Okay. Thank you. I'll go to Director Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It seems to me it would be a good idea to wait until the new chair and vice chair is in place before we go forward with this. So I would be in favor of skipping the October 15th meeting for those reasons.
Okay, thank you. And I just to remind the board that there will be 5 new board members November 5th, so they haven't had an opportunity to engage in this and the decision making on this. Director Holmes, you're next, please.
I'm not sure what the best venue, I guess, to discuss it. I think if we do have a meeting to discuss what approach we want to take in October, it might save a lot of time during strategic planning and budgeting if we have a clearer idea what we want to do going into that. Otherwise, maybe it is a better left for strategic planning. I'm not really sure in my head, but I can see if we don't deal with it this month, we're going to be dealing with it during strategic planning, and it'll be taking up a lot of time in strategic planning. So all that to say, I'm not really sure what the best approach is.
Okay, thank you. Director Gettens.
you through the chair. So the wording from July 16th, that was the administrative recommendation, is that the hospital district develop a policy that provides a flexible funding mechanism for primary care clinics. And then we always have the questions around legality and how we can do it and how we have to designate things and is it aligned with interior health. And I think those are all very valid questions, but we need the answers so we know what we're discussing and if we can then make a decision. So I think it's important to gather the information. Any of the directors that are joining us on November 6th will also have that information because it'll be in their agenda. But I think we need to know what we're actually talking and discussing about with the answers to those questions, or we cannot move forward. So I would like to see us get that information before we go into strategic planning so we can make a decision whether we want to do it or not. So for me, if it's the incorrect wording is around the word policy, but we need answers to the questions we've been asking. Thank you.
So then I'll go to CAO. Is that it? Do we have the time to have that produced for the 15th, or is that something that we need to bring to our 2nd November meeting? Or it could be reviewed ahead of time by the board members and then a decision made on the 5th, whatever the date is in November, 19th.
Yeah. Oh, well, we would give it our best shot, but obviously, if the board directs, we would have a report. The quality of the report may be somewhat lacking based on the time.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just wondering if these are leftover hands, Director Holmes, Director Robinson, or did you have a question again, a comment? No, Holmes, okay, that was leftover. Director Robinson, leftover, okay, thank you. Well, we could leave it that CIO will look into it with staff and see what could be pulled together for the 15th. If that's not doable, then it would have to come forward in November with the new chair, vice chair, and board. Director Gittins, go ahead.
Thank you. And to the chair, I just want to reiterate that I know it's a big ask of staff to get that done, because I know there's a lot of work being done right now with the staff. So if you can't get that information by the 15th, then even if we have it before we go into strategic planning, so then we at least we know the tools or the mechanism or how this can be operationalized, because that's how we can decide if this board wants to do that or not. Thank you.
Okay, good point. So that's what we'll strive for. We'll see if we can have enough information to do a meeting on the 15th of October. If not, we'll plug forward to have that information for November for strategic planning and November board meetings. Okay, is there anything further? If not, I'll be looking for a motion to adjourn hospital. Katie Robinson, thank you. Director Robinson, is there a seconder? Director Gittins, thank you. I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Hands can come down. Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And I'm just going to ask Director Bauer, can we hear you now? Or are you still?
He's phoning.
He's phoning us. Yeah, he's on mute. Oh. You may need to log right out and start over again. Oh, Danny's working on it.
It's good now.
He's good now?
Should be able to hear.
No, we're not
Tell
hearing.
him to unmute and try it.
He is unmuted.
He muted his phone.
I guess *3, is that the one?
Oh, *3?
No, that's.
You can keep going.
That was happening to me all the time when I was at travel.
Right, well, Daniel, keep working on that.
The rest of us will take a break, then you can keep working.
Yeah. Okay, so we still have 3 or 4 minutes, folks, before we can formally start the board meeting. So I'll just suggest if anyone needs a washroom break or grab a coffee, and we'll start in 3 or 4 minutes. Thank you. Put that on mute.
Anybody there? Can you hear me? Mark, can you hear me? Oh, good. I've got some feedback, but yeah. Okay. Strange. So what happens now? So I'm on the phone now. Oh, wow, what a feedback. Do you have any feedback, Mark? Do you have any? Hello? No?
Yeah, hello. We can hear you, Manfred.
Oh, finally. Jesus. Yeah, okay. I guess I can mute it now. Oh, man. Some audio differences here, difficulties. All right.
Okay, folks, we're going to get started with the regular board meeting. And once again, I'd like to welcome Martin Johansson to the team, and Aaron Trainer, and Doug Holmes back again, and alternate director CJ Rhodes, who is with us today, filling in for Director McCordoff. Have a look at your agendas, directors. This is your only opportunity to remove an item from the consent agenda. And I'm going to remove item A1H. Those minutes do have an error in them. So I'm just going to take those off. We're going to fix that, and we'll see that back on October 15th. So other than A1H, did anyone else have an item to come off of the consent agenda? I'm not seeing any hands up. Therefore, I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Moved by Director Pendergraft, seconded by Director Bush. Call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Hands can come down. Anybody opposed? Motion carries. And I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda corporate issues as amended. Moved by Director Bush, seconded by Director Rhodes. Call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Anybody opposed? That carries. And takes us to consent agenda development services. Looking for a motion to move that. Director Pendergraph and Director Coyne Jr., thank you. And I'll call the question.
Sorry, hold on. Was that the Development Services consent agenda?
Yes.
Okay, so do we have a seconder who's rural?
We had Director Pendergraph moved it.
Yeah.
Director Coyne Jr. seconded.
No.
That
It's
one.
gotta be rural.
Sorry, we need a rural on that one. A rural director. Director Gittens, thank you very much. No, Director Bush is in on that too. All the rurals are popping up. Okay, and I'll call the question then. All in favor? Thank you. Anybody opposed? That carries. Okay, that takes us down to B, Development Services, B1, Agricultural Land Commission referral for 5317 Sunflower Street in Area C, CAO.
So this is an application just south of Oliver, Madam Chair, and it's an application to the Agricultural Land Commission for a really big house. And the problem we have with it is that the house size doesn't meet the rules around either the zoning bylaw or the Agricultural Land Commission rules. So two different things. One is parcel coverage, and that's what we cover in our zoning bylaw. We have a maximum of 676 square meters in the zoning bylaw, and sorry, we have 3% rule in the zoning bylaw, and so in this case it comes out to 676 square meters, which is above the 3%. The Agricultural Land Commission has a maximum floor area requirement of 500 square meters. This house is 867 square meters of floor area. So we've got the parcel coverage and we've got the floor area issues. This house exceeds both in the zoning bylaw and the Agricultural Land Commission. So that, Madam Chair, is why we're recommending that this be not authorized to go to the ALC.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Director Knodel on this.
The landowner has to withdraw his application and resubmit that our size requirements, so I move the recommendation, the administrative recommendation.
You said Director Knodel is moving the administrative recommendation? Okay, seconded by Director Bush. And we do have the applicant on the phone to speak to this.
Do we, Danny?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, so I believe both applicants are on the phone, Sukhmander Singh and Surjit Sandhu. Did one of you want to speak to this?
That's them.
Hello? Is that noise is coming from them or one of our board members?
Are they on the phone?
Yeah, they're calling in on the phone.
Because I see Director Bauer isn't on mute, so I'm not sure if we're getting feedback from him.
No, he's using his phone.
He's using his phone, he's okay. Okay, I'll ask again if Sukhmander Singh or Surjit Sandhu would like to speak to the motion to not authorize.
We just hung up again.
Oh.
By calling them back.
Oh, we've lost them? Okay, we're calling them back. Bear with us. I'm just going to.
available at this time. When you reach the customer at a later date, please remind the customer to access their voicemail and initialize their mailbox. Thank
Okay, I can see, it looks like we have Sergi Sandhu back on.
That was his voicemail.
That was his voicemail we got, okay. I'm going to ask Director Knodel, did you have any feedback from the applicants then? We can't seem to get them on the phone.
At the APC meeting, they proposed to withdraw and resubmit to our zoning square footage report. I don't know if they've changed their mind since then or not, because it was clear that we would have to deny the application either way. And once they submit, if they're inside our zoning, then the APC was comfortable with it going forward to the ALC for agreement. But
okay, well, they were on the phone listening when you did make that statement and the motion. So they appeared to have hung up. So maybe they were satisfied with that since they did speak with you about it. So we have the motion on the floor. Were there any comments, questions? Director Monteith, go ahead, please.
To the chair, is it better for the applicant to, I guess, pull it versus deny it? Like, do they have to restart the process again? Or can they just resubmit based on the changes? Thank you.
Go to CAO on that.
So I'm going to refer this to Mr. Garish, Madam Chair.
Put Chris on the spot.
Give us a recommendation on this.
To the chair, I'm looking at cost and timing for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Garish? We can't hear Chris. Would it might be appropriate to defer this, I think, so that we can sort this out. We certainly wouldn't want to cost an applicant more money and delays by, if they were wanting to withdraw, then my suggestion would have been to just withdraw this report, then put forward a motion to not authorize. It may cost them additional funding, money to reapply. That's just my suggestion. Director Gettens, go ahead, please.
I would like to second that, actually, Chair. I think that's a good idea. I would hate for us to misunderstand they're hanging up by accident.
Right, okay. So, Director Monteith, is that just a leftover hand then? Yeah, it's a leftover hand. So, okay, so now we've gone to a motion to defer. Director Knodel.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. This is a rural vote. Not seeing their hands. I'll call the question then. All in favor? Thank you. Hands can come down. And anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. We'll go to B2. Official Community Plan and Zoning Bylaw Amendments, Proposed Dock Regulations, Okanagan Basin Lakes, CAO.
So this is a recurring item for us too, Madam Chair. This started a while ago down on Osoyoos Lake in Area A with a commercial dock that we didn't have any rules at the time in order to address. And we've had a number of discussions about this since. And we believe that we have captured now what the board wants to put into the official community plan and the zoning bylaws. And I'll just note that this is just for the Okanagan zoning bylaws. It does not affect any of the Area G or H zonings or OCPs. So we're prepared to recommend that this bylaw go forward for first and second reading Madam Chair, and then it come back before the board for public hearing on November 19th.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll go to Director Pendergraft.
I'll move it, please.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a seconder? Director Monteith, looks like she's seconding. Thank you. Are there any questions, comments on this? This is a rural vote only. I'm not seeing any hands up. I'll call the question then. All in favor? Okay, hands can come down. Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. That takes us to Public Works. C1, organic composting site, CAO.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So the board's aware that we have purchased 1313 Greyback Mountain Road for the possible construction of an organics facility, processing and treatment facility. So one of the excluded items that was on the property when we did the purchase was a manufactured home. And at the point where we were negotiating the sale, because it was a court-ordered sale, that wasn't party to the negotiations. Since the deal has closed, the owner of the manufactured home has suggested that he'd rather not move it off-site and that he would put it up for sale, but he offered it to us first. So we had a valuation placed on it. Because it is on a foundation, it's hooked up to water, septic, it has power, able to be immediately moved into. We believe we could make good use of that for office space. The value placed on it by the realtor was in between the $160,000 to $200,000 range. To replace it, we know that's a big range, but nevertheless, we thought we would get good value for it. We made an offer of $110,000. He accepted, so we're recommending to the board that we purchase that modular home for $110,000, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Looking for a motion on this one. Director Bush is moving it. Thank you. Director Gettins looks like is seconding. And are there questions or comments? Director Holmes?
Yeah, thank you. I guess if at some point in the future we find we don't really have a use for it, we could always sell it ourselves.
We believe that we could sell it and get the value back. Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did anybody else have a question or comment? This is a weighted corporate vote. Director Holmes, that's a leftover hand, I think. Okay, anybody else with a question or comment? Okay, I'll call the question then. All in favor? Hands can come down. Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries. That takes us to C2, Net Zero Waste Eastgate Partnership Agreement, CAO.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Back in 2018, the province had a grant program available called the Organics Infrastructure Program. And we applied on our Oliver Organics program, and we received a grant for that. It was available for private sector applications if the private operator had a deal with the local government in the area that they were putting it in. So Net Zero Waste, which some of you may be familiar, has an organics treatment facility down in Abbotsford and a number of others throughout the province. They're a big operator. They did purchase a property just on the east side of Manning Park in Area H, and they wanted us to partner with them for an application. The application was for just over $4 million, and they were successful on that. It took a long time, so it was into 2019 before they found out that they were eligible, and then it was a commitment to enter into a partnership agreement with the regional district. The way the grant works is that the local government then takes the risk for the appropriate expenditure of the amount of money. So with a $4 million grant, we were concerned about that and wanted to make sure that we were protected. So it took us a long time, is where I'm going with this, in order to negotiate an appropriate deal that covered us for risk, but at the same time was still practical for the organic facility owner to go ahead with the project. Because anytime that you put a bonding or letters of credit or other requirements on a project, it costs money. So we have just finally come to that agreement. We sent it into the province. They had still some problems with it themselves. We've resolved those. So we are ready now, Madam Chair, to recommend that we execute this partnership agreement with Net Zero Waste.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Is anyone interested in moving this? Director Roberts? It's moving. Is there a seconder? Director Coyne Senior, thank you. Any comments or questions? Director Coyne Senior? Oh, your hand's down now, thank you. Director Monteith, go ahead, please.
To the chair, I guess I'm wondering about entering or supporting a private enterprise when we're looking at doing a regional composting facility. Is that competing with what we're trying to do as a regional service? Is that where we're going? Are we going to have these siloed composting facility and then try to have a regional one? I'm not sure. Question.
Yeah, so Net Zero Waste will be drawing from other areas in the province. I think they're looking up towards the Kamloops area as their target, but also the coast. We have certainly negotiated into the agreement favorable conditions for us to take compost there if we deem a need, but we don't think that that will impact our organic compost facility at Campbell Mountain whatsoever.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? This is a weighted corporate vote. Not seeing any other questions. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, hands can come down. Thank you. Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries. That'll take us down to D, Community Services, D1, Award of Garnet Family Park Public Washroom Project, CAO.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So Director Orbeck has funded this out of his Community Works program in conjunction with the Heritage Hills Community Association. A lot of work went on there this summer. We did go ahead, went out for tender on this. Plan B came back with the best proposal. I will inform the board that this now is retroactive. We've already signed off on the contract because we have a number of washroom facilities going in throughout the regional district, and it was economy of scale in order to get this one going at the time. So we did sign the contract on this, so we're now recommending that the board authorize to do that in the amount of $96,000 to Plan B contractors.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'll go to Director Olbrich.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to move the administrative recommendation, please.
Thank you. And I see a seconder, Director Coyne Jr. Thank you. Any questions or comments on this one? It is a weighted corporate vote. I'll call the question. All in favor? Hands can come down. Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We go to D2, 2021 UBCM Community Resilience Investment Grant Program, CAO.
I'm going to ask Mr. Woods to come up and talk to this, Madam Chair. There are a number of programs under this grant that we thought we'd submit on, and there may be questions on this, so we'll get Mr. Woods to do it in detail.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So our current program under the CRI is a UBCM-based program. So this is one that's been around for about 4 years in its current form. Obviously, we've had some great success in the past. We've talked about this in the boardroom before. We've updated our community wildfire protection plan. Most recently, we currently have a development company working with us to update the OCP for electoral area A on principles related to Fire Smart. We've established an interagency committee which has all of the partners that can come to the table and affect any positive change related to fuel management. That group now meets on a regular basis. We've updated our website to advertise the Fire Smart programs that are available, and we've spent as much time as we can working with our communities to build Fire Smart boards, and these are probably where the majority of the focus is going for the province of BC. They've changed their program and jumping into the 2021 ask, and this is the full $600,000. The province has allowed us as a regional district to apply for a full regional district grant of $150,000, and they've allowed each electoral area to apply for up to $50,000, so an additional $450,000. They want us to put our attention towards building Fire Smart communities. So where we have a lot of communities that are looking at guidance and how they go about doing that, we're proposing that we build a program that allows us to support the existing Fire Smart boards, because there's some very successful boards in our region now, and also help build new boards. So where we've got communities or neighborhoods that have some interested people, this takes champions, it takes volunteers. So the province is interested in ensuring that we follow those principles as we support those groups. So the program that we put together for that amount, I've broken it down within the report here, that focuses a lot on education. Some of that education would be done by those Fire Smart boards. Some of it would be done by ourselves. We're also proposing that we would use some of the funds, and the province is allowing us to do so for the first time, towards staff. And we feel like there needs to be a relationship between those Fire Smart communities, boards, and the regional district to continue to move towards building these principles into our own documents. So for that reason, we also have funds that are going towards the continuation of the OCP updates, the work that's being done within electoral area A. Those principles can be moved throughout the rest of the region and the other OCPs and zoning bylaws, and the planning department can certainly be a part of that. The interagency workshops that we continue to have with our committees, that will also continue, as well as Fire Smart training. So this is allowing us to actually put money into getting certified Fire Smart assessors within our communities. One of the biggest asks that we get from members of the public is, can somebody please come and give me some expertise and some help on this? So in order to have capacity to do so, this is allowing those Fire Smart boards and members of communities to actually get the appropriate level of training so they can go out and build their own capacity within neighborhoods. And then on the boots on the ground side of things, we're piloting right now a Fire Smart chipping program. We're looking at rolling one out within Naramata and the community of Greater West Bench. And this is something we'd also propose to build on in 2021 moving forward, obviously in cooperation with the Fire Smart boards and our own programs. And I'll leave it at that, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking for questions. I see Director Monteith has one. Go ahead, please.
To the chair, Mr. Woods, when you mentioned the electoral areas being able to apply for it, if the regional district is applying for it on behalf of all the electoral areas, does that mean that the areas can't get their own funding? Like, I know the fire department last year got its own funding to do its own project. Are we taking that opportunity away from our fire departments?
The only program available through UBCM is through the regional districts. So the $50,000 that's available is available to communities. If a fire department is taking the lead on Fire Smart work, they can certainly access that money through the regional district board. Monies that have flowed through to Fire Smart boards so far have come in the form of $10,000 grants, which we've applied for. We had 3 last year, 2 the year before. So for example, the Cleveland Community Fire Smart Board, again, our intention would be to work with them to find out exactly what they require, including that training we talked about or any other support they need, and they would have access to that $50,000. So in the event that we're successful, we would be reaching out to all those groups to find out what their needs are and flow the money through to them. And that's the criteria of the grant through the province.
Okay, thank you. Director Roberts, go ahead.
Thank you to the chair. Mr. Wood, is this my understanding then, where I have challenges in small communities that, let's say there's a subdivision, senior citizens, they're unable to pull it together themselves, that this gives an opportunity to have maybe a trained individual from the RDOS facilitating that kind of program in a community that may not be able to help itself or really needs guidance and support?
Yeah, that would be a good example. I think I'd take it one step further. Ideally, individuals within that neighborhood or community could come forward if they had an interest and actually get their own level of training, so that capacity can continue on to grow. But yeah, we want a foundation program here at the regional district that can support them.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. I'm looking for someone to move the administrative recommendation. Director Pendergraft, thank you. Director Bauer, seconding. I'll ask again, any further questions or comments? It is a corporate vote. Not seeing any. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Hands can go down. Anybody opposed? Nope. Motion carries. Thank you very much. That takes us down to E, Finance. E1, Property Tax Exemption Bylaw number 2910-2020, CAO.
Oh, thanks, Madam Chair. So this will be Mr. Savino's first shot at the big show to give a report out to the board. So, I mean, those that have been on the board for a while will know that the Local Government Act enables regional districts to provide exemptions to eligible organizations, and it sets out what those organizations are. With Jim just coming on board this week, he's had a quick look at this, but has already found an amendment that we needed to make to the schedule that we sent out to the board with the bylaws. So I'm going to turn it over to him, Madam Chair, to present on this.
Thank you. With the statutory exemptions, there's two permissive tax exemptions. There's permissive tax exemption, which you as a board have authority to accept or not, and the statutory.
You may have to speak up, Jim.
Yeah.
I think the mic's right in front of you there.
You might have a hard time hearing you, so.
I'll start over again.
Shout at that speaker.
Thank you, board. So, as far as the local government tax exemption goes, there's two types. Statutory, which is automatic and it's controlled by the province, and that mostly is churches. And the other one is permissive tax exemptions, in which you as the board have the authority to determine if you want to pass them or not. And on the permissive tax exemption, it is based on the non-profit portion. So that's determined by usually the assessment authority. They determine what percentage is non-profit, and then the tax is based on the profit portion. So as far as the report that you received goes, there's two changes on here, and that was it's important that we go by the rules. And as far as the Royal Canadian Legion goes, originally what you've seen was the tax exemption was based on the full assessment. We went back, looked at it, staff changed it based on the non-profit portion. So it's there's a section in there that I colored, and I have to apologize. Sometimes you may hear me quote colors that aren't what they are. I am colorblind. So I have a go-to person right now in Noel to help me. And I know in yellow is the Royal Canadian Legion, and that's $412. The other change is the Okanagan Falls United Church. They applied for a permissive tax exemption. However, we had staff check, and they verified that they are getting the statutory exemption. So we've taken them off the list because the board doesn't have any discretion on that. And I had staff also check to determine if there's other churches on there, and there are. I anticipate the board receiving a report from staff that has a list of statutory ones. I think that's important. That's something that I've provided previous councils of what's out there and what the taxes are being exempt.
Can I just, Christy, did you hand out the amended
I never
schedule?
got anything.
I emailed it.
Emailed
Sorry, I
it.
missed it.
Yeah, we don't have a colored, we
Yeah.
don't have a sheet with
I
any
missed
colors
it.
on it.
When was that? 'Cause,
Last night.
oh, yeah, I didn't see it. Fortunately.
We will get the amended schedule out to the board
Yes.
shortly.
So if there's any questions, sorry that you don't have the copy, but so how it reads is Royal Canadian Legion is now without, it's $412, and the Okanagan Falls United Church is no longer on the list. So the tax exemption, tax exemption is $44,121.
Okay, so currently that, we have the Royal Canadian Legion, the amount there is amended down to $412.
Correct.
And we've removed the Okanagan Falls United Church because that will be on the statutory list.
Correct.
Okay, good. So hopefully that's clear for everyone, and now we'll take questions. Director Bauer, go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yeah.
Oh,
Can
we
you hear
got
me?
now.
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, no, he did something.
Oh,
How about now?
yes,
No?
go ahead.
Yes.
Yes?
Okay, so terrible with the phone. I'd like to make a motion to take off all the golf courses off that list as well. I think we really need to make sure that the bottom line for the average taxpayer stays low. And I have a hard time to explain to people who are deferring mortgages and can't hardly make general payments why we should use their taxpayers' money, to subsidize the golf course. And I know there's arguments to be made that there is public access, but when you look at their rates, to me, they have to be self-sustaining. This is a discretionary, permissive tax exemption, and so it's at the board's discretion. I certainly wouldn't be in favor of any of those golf courses.
Okay, so was that a motion or just
Yes,
open for
yes,
dialogue?
not it was a motion to take the 3 golf courses that are on there off, and there are other applicants that could be discussed, but my motion is in particular to the golf course.
Okay, so Director Bauer has a motion to remove the golf courses from this list. Is there a seconder for that? Director Roberts, are you seconding? Yes, you are. Okay, thank you. Is there discussion around the removal of the golf courses? Okay, so there were some hands up that have disappeared. Oh, Director Holmes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering if, are all these exemptions 100% exemptions, or any of them different percentages, like 75% or 50% or anything like that, or is it just all 100? Because if maybe, maybe the golf societies don't deserve 100%, but maybe another percentage to help them out.
Let's go ahead, Jim.
Thank you, Chair. The percentages would not be necessarily 100. It would be based on the nonprofit portion. And as far as golf courses go, the history is that a small portion of it would be exempt because there is a huge part that is profitable. So it would depend on the association or the company.
Okay, so just to follow up then, so it's 100%. So for all of them across the board, it's 100% on the nonprofit portion.
It's 100% on the nonprofit portion, Correct.
But we don't necessarily have to make it 100%.
No.
No,
We can,
so it's,
depending on what's important to us, we could have different percentages for different types of organizations.
Correct. If that's where the board wants to go, there would be a permissive tax exemption policy that the board would follow so that it would make it easier in future years and today, for instance.
right, okay, so let's hear from CAO Newell.
So I'm not the expert on this, Madam Chair, but the bylaw says for the Fairview Mountain Golf Club and for the Princeton Golf Club that we are giving an exemption to the extent of an 80% exemption for improvements for clubhouse, excluding residential portion of facility. That's on Fairview, and just for the 80% improvements on the clubhouse on Princeton. And the City of Penticton exemption on the golf course is because that is leased from the City of Penticton. That's and only on the portion that is outside of the municipal boundary. We don't give exemptions for anything within an incorporated community. This is just within the regional district.
Right, okay. And we don't have the policy in here, do we? Do we? So this might be a greater discussion moving forward. Let's hear from a few more people. Director Monteith, go ahead.
To the chair, I'm wondering about the Caledon Community Hall. If it's not on the list, why it's not on the list? Because to me, it would make sense that it would be tax exempt.
Does that just mean they didn't apply?
That's correct.
Yeah.
They need to apply.
Okay, and we do run an ad for folks that,
would be
I've seen
policy.
the ads out there that we run ads reminding people of the deadline to apply.
Sorry, is it too late to apply now? This like the final kick?
It would depend on, usually the board has discretion in accepting late items. It has to be passed by the board, permissive tax exemption, no later than October 31st. So is it too late? No.
Getting there.
Getting there, we have one
there.
more meeting.
Do you want to make an exception in that all of a sudden you're going to get all the late ones? Is the board willing to review all the late items?
Right, okay. Thank you. Let's hear from some others then. Director Robinson.
Oh, there it goes. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
it just occurs to me, I guess it's more the timing than anything else if we're going to consider not exempting golf courses. You know, golf is one of the few sports left that people can use while social distancing during COVID. And it does promote health and welfare. And I think at this particular time, I would be very reluctant to start cutting that. Just a thought.
Okay, thank you. Director Johansson.
Thank you, Chair. I was surprised to see golf courses on there as well as Director Bauer. One of the things that concerns me is they are run for profit. Speaking at the Fairview Mountain Golf Course, I don't see anything there that's open to the public or being used by the public other than it is a public golf course and people can come and pay to golf there. It doesn't seem to me to be in the same category as, say, a tennis court or a pickleball court where you can just go and play there. Anybody can go there. It's a public facility. I don't see the nonprofit organization and the recreational land is something that does fall under Class 8. But again, you can't go out to that golf course unless you're paying to use it. So I would be in favor of limiting or eliminating those tax exemptions on those facilities.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Jim.
I just make a recommendation. If the board is serious about looking at changing some of these items, do you think it's fair to cancel a permissive tax exemption while they're in the process of doing their budget? Because then it's going to be a hardship. if this is something that can be a board directive on the strategic priorities, where council could bring back a report to the board, and then the board can look at the permissive tax exemptions with a revised policy.
Okay, so thought there. I'm going to go to Director Obert.
Yes, thank you. I want to say welcome to Jim. My question is, and I'm having trouble hearing, so I apologize if you've covered this. The Legion in OK Falls, I was looking at the materials in the agenda, and then I may have misheard something, and I just want a clarification. Can you clarify what amount of exemption the Legion would be getting under what's being proposed? I've lost track.
Sorry, the change for the Legion, originally it was 100% of the assessed value. It was noted that, well, that's not correct, and it was changed to a percentage only of the nonprofit portion, and that was $412.
Okay, thank you. A follow-up, Director Obert?
Yeah, I don't understand the Legion. I thought it would be all not for profit. So that's when you say it's the not for profit portion, I'm confused.
There is a portion that is business, and that's not included. That's stated as a profit portion. So when it's calculated, there's something that looks at the percentages, like the CAO stated on the golf was 80%. So that's not something that we establish, that's established for us, and then we calculate the assessed value times the projected tax rate.
Okay, thank you. Director Coyne Jr.?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I was having a hard time hearing. The Princeton Golf Course, you said it's 80% of the total of the clubhouse? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Because the golf course is owned by the town of Princeton with a society that runs the golf course.
So, sorry, is the thought that that's an error then?
No, it's in regional district, but it's owned by the town of Princeton and it's run by a society. So I'm just trying to get my head around the taxation of it. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Director Trainer.
I'm just wondering, if we were to cancel their tax exemption, do we give some kind of warning? Like, do we do 50% the first year, go to 100, or do we just say your exemption's gone? Like it's a big budget hit for some of those societies, so I was just wondering about that.
Right. Did you want to answer that, Jim?
If the board decides to say no, then we would phone them up and state that they don't have any exemption. That's why I earlier stated that the board, we want to look at giving them, if the board wants to change it, giving them some notice, a 1-year notice, or that it may change. If I may just talk about the question regarding the Princeton owning the facility. It's any facility, municipal facility that's in a regional district or municipality is tax exempt automatic, unless the municipality regional district leases it. At that point, it's taxable, and that's why there is an exemption that has to be determined, some sort of benefit, because there is a noted nonprofit section to that. So that's why it was calculated 80%. Now, just so that the board knows, the regional district can challenge anything that has to do with the assessment authority. So if there's a concern, I could certainly find out why or how the 80% was established.
Okay, thank you. So if we vote some of these out, we would certainly let them know right away. Jim's suggestion or comment might be that sometimes we should be giving them greater notice. So it may be more palatable to include all of these and then give notice of future changes, and even bring this back for the board to discuss how you'd like to move forward on these. But let's hear some other thoughts here. I've got Director Obrick, then Rieger. Oh, no, not Director Obrick. Okay, Director Rieger, go ahead, please.
Thank you to the chair. Just to clarify on these tax exemptions, do they affect only in each electoral area, that electoral area, as opposed to somehow affecting across the entire RDOS? Isn't this an individual electoral area tax issue?
That's correct. It just affects the electoral area.
Great, thank you. Good question. Director Robinson?
Thank you. Just one more consideration before anybody votes is that I hope the director from whatever area that might not get this exemption is taking into consideration the tourism aspect as well. That draws a lot of people to our areas to use golf courses. And they are, I believe, all the ones we're talking about are public courses. So it's not a closed membership or anything. And I would view it as any other sport being used that people come in, you know, if you were to use a tennis court and pay for it. You know, there's a lot of things to consider before you start taking away the tax exemption, but I think tourism and health would be two of the main ones. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Johansson?
Thank you, Chair. Just some follow-up comments. I do think that we should probably have a good review of our permissive tax exemptions and not because there's a lot of them that have been on the list for years, and to take them away with this kind of notice when they're not applying to continue that tax exemption, it's something that's been allowed for years or approved for years, that probably a 1-year notice would make it appropriate. In addition to that, I know in particular the golf courses, I'm still struggling with why they're getting a tax exemption, you know, as opposed to a tennis court where you can go and play for nothing. You don't have to pay anybody to go and play there. But still, I know that the COVID pandemic has been really hard on everybody, and in particular, the golf courses were able to open late, but they're still not been able to hold club championships or the normal events where they've been able to make profits on their restaurants and their lounges, etc. So I think it would be a bit of a hardship to take it away, in particular to those ones with no notice, at least of a 1-year notice. So I'm in favor of moving away from it, but I'm not in favor of cutting them off with basically no notice.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Director Holmes.
Yeah, thanks. The way I look at these things is, if these organizations weren't there, is it something the local government would be doing in their place? And in a lot of these cases, they probably would. If you look at, there are lots of municipal golf courses out there, you know, and as long as it's open to the public, and just because you pay a fee doesn't mean it's not open to the public. There's lots of, you know, recreation facilities where you pay fees to, like swimming pools or whatever. So I think the main thing is, you know, we look at, does it align with our own strategic priorities? You know, like providing youth programming, the economic impact, all that sort of thing, and is it providing a public service? Because if it is, I think they qualify for. They should certainly qualify. And the other thing, I guess, if we decide that that they shouldn't qualify, you know, taking a $5,000 hit out of an organization's budget just like that, that's quite a bit for these nonprofits. And so the approach I would recommend is that we do it in a gradual thing over a few years. So maybe, you know, 1 year they get 75% exemption, the next year 50%. So to wind them down so that they're able to ease the burden, so that they just don't have that financial hit in one go.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I just ask directors, there's a lot of hands up, some of them might be left over, so just if it's up by accident, thank you. Director Trainer, you're next. Go ahead, please.
I agree with what Director Holmes said. And another thing to think about too is fairness. Like when I look at the list, I also see that Nickel Plate Cross Country Ski Club is on there. And how does that relate to the golf clubs? You know, like why would they get the exemption and not the golf club? So before a decision is made, I definitely think that we really need to think about how, if we're being fair to all of the clubs that are applying.
Great, thank you very much. Director Gittins?
Thank you to the chair. You know, when Director Bauer first brought this up about the golf courses, it's something that I've always wondered as well, because my impression of a golf course is you do pay, you know, it's not the $2 or the $3 to go for a swim or rent skis, but you pay quite a bit, and then you can go and purchase food usually, you can purchase alcohol. I don't know if these golf courses donate back to the community, you know, unlike the Legion or the Elks and that kind of thing where they fundraise. So I do feel like when an organization has something to sell, to make money off of, I think that's in a little bit of a different category. And I think that, so I'm curious just to hear how, for example, Fairview Golf Club Society is a nonprofit, and what does that mean as the nonprofit standing? And if it is only going to impact those area taxes, I would like to hear from that specific director as well, their thoughts. And maybe there's something more here happening with the golf club. I just don't know how it's sorry. I think when people apply for grants, we hear about what they're going to do with the money and why we're going to give them taxpayers money to keep doing their good work. And like what Director Bauer is saying is we're taking away from our residents in a way because they're not participating in the tax pool. So I would like more information as well, please.
Great, thank you very much. I can state too that this is not new, and Director Pendergraft knows this. We have had this debate off and on over the years. I fought this battle about 8 years ago to no success. So it would be something that would be great that we could really sort out. And I always question the golf course exemption, but others. But I also agree. I don't think I'd like to see that cut this year. I think I personally would move forward, and then we need to bring this back to the table and make some decisions and give notice if we are going to not be supporting certain types of businesses or groups in the future. So we still have a motion on the floor to remove the golf courses from the list, and we have more questions. I've got Director Bauer next. Go ahead, please.
So the reason why I put the motion and focused on the golf course is because there are other discussions about other applicants, and that goes towards a review of the policy, as Director Trainer and Director Holmes stated. That is good, but it's a COVID year, and that's why I brought this up. Because at the Penticton Golf Club, for instance, if you just walk in and want to play around on your 18 holes, you're paying $69, and you haven't had a drink, you haven't had a caddy, or you haven't had a golf club yet. And if you're a member and you have a guest, the guest pays $59. So this is not the same use as going up to the soccer field up at the school where everybody can use, or the tennis courts, as Director Johansson mentioned. This is a completely different situation here, and I would have a hard time to explain that to the people on the street, that we use their tax money to subsidize this kind of entertainment. This should be financed solely by membership or from the public by the fees you pay, or consumption tax, either or, because that is what it is. So I'm 100% against keeping the golf clubs on there. And yes, the other applicants should also be discussed, and we should have a review down the road. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Coyne Sr.
I'm quite happy to have the Princeton Golf Club on there. They do a tremendous job of bringing tourists to our town. They supply some pretty darn good jobs for year after year for people, and the money just kind of goes around in a circle. So I'm quite happy to keep them on there. As for reviewing it, I believe that may be something we should look at down the road. But to cut anybody off like this at this particular time, I do not support that idea.
Okay, thank you very much. Director Knodel, go ahead.
I might have to agree with Director Coyne, but I'd definitely like to hear from these applicants. I'm just not familiar enough with golfing. Used for a golf club generally after dark as home defense. So, all the aspects of it are kind of foreign to me. So, the review would probably be a really good idea. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Roberts.
Thank you to the chair. Just to add, again, I'm really in support of a review. I do support Director Bauer's idea in regards to the golf courses, because I kind of feel, what's next? Like, for instance, why is then a ski hill, shouldn't it be tax exempt? It brings in tourists. There's, and it's a business, but you got to pay money, nearly $100, before you strap on your skis. Where does that stop? And I just think that's really what needs to be reviewed. It's they have to have a business model, and just that, it employs people, but yes, so does ski hills, et cetera, et cetera. So, I just don't really understand the concept, and that's why I really look forward to a real review of this.
Okay, thank you. Jim has some feedback there.
If I may, and I'll use the word council, I wrote it down here, use the word board, not council, but in this case, council is appropriate. What I did to my previous councils is I recommended that the review be done every 4 years to coincide with the elections, so that the new board can have an update of what's going on and why you're authorizing the exemption, and then ask for the representatives of the organizations to come in and give an explanation of what they do, what benefits they provide, etc. And that would answer a lot of your questions. So review, yes, and I think that should be part of what I'm hearing is a new policy that should be done.
That sounds excellent. I think that's a really good idea, that we move in that direction. Director Bauer, is that a leftover hand? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, okay. As I mentioned, this has come up more than once before, and I had a similar comments as Director Bauer, but at this time, I'm not comfortable myself supporting a cut. I'm going to go with supporting what's presented with the minor amendments, but I would like to see this come back to the board. We need to review policy. We need to figure out how we want to move forward on these. So right now we have a motion on the floor to remove the golf courses from the list. And I'm going to call the question on that motion. All in favor? Okay, we had 3 hands up at one point. You can bring those down. I'm going to go to those opposed. And please keep your hands up for Ms. Malden.
Do you want to maybe read those off?
So opposed, we have Director Coyne Sr., Director Bloomfield, Director Traynor, Director Holmes, Director Robinson, Director Johansson, Director Knodel, Director Coyne Jr., Director Oberick, Director Pendergraft, Director Bush, Director Kozakovich, Director Gettins, Director Monteith. Did I capture everybody? Was there anybody missing from the opposed vote? Okay, I think we're good. So that fails. So Director Johansson, I see your hand up. Go ahead, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just wondering if we need a motion to have the tax exemptions brought back for review and policy be reviewed in a timely manner, like so that decisions could be made before the tax exemptions are given for 2022, I guess.
Okay, so you're not referencing the current list that we need to have approved this month. You're looking at making a motion for future, correct?
Yeah, I'd just like to know the timeline on that, because I don't, I think well, from what I heard, there seemed to be general consensus to leave the tax exemption list the way it is with the minor adjustments that were being proposed. But just wondering when that's going to come back for review, and just do we need to make a motion on that, or will that come back in a timely manner so that we can make decisions for 2022 and not be in the same spot next year, not wanting to move ahead because it's too late.
Yeah, I'll go to CAO Newell.
So we know the intent of the board, Madam Chair. So we'll take that under advisement, and we'll come back with the policy and a timeline because we have times entrenched in the policy. So we need to dig that out and bring it back. So we'll just make a note of that, and we'll get back to you early in the year.
Great. So that still takes us to the fact that we need a motion to approve the current list of exemptions with the 2 amendments. Moved by Director Pendergraft. Director Robinson, are you seconding? Yes. Okay, thank you. Are there any comments or questions about that motion to approve the list with the 2 amendments, which was the Okanagan Falls United Church is not on that list. They're on a separate list, and the Okanagan Falls Canadian Legion, the exemption amount is $412. Director Olberg, you had a question or comment?
Yes, and thank you. After we spoke on this a number of minutes ago, it occurred to me, and my information may not be accurate, but my information is that legions get an exemption in municipalities in the region. And the question I have is, do the other legions in the region, do they get the same treatment with respect to this? It looks like a 20% exemption instead of the full exemption. I'll be speaking with the legion, and I'm sure they'll have questions. I know when this issue arose, that was one of the comments that they brought forth, is that other legions in the region had received the exemption, and they themselves are struggling for so many reasons. So it's a very hard situation for the legion, and so I'm looking for clarification. And I don't know if anybody knows the answer, but is this how the legions are being? The experience they're having elsewhere, in the municipalities in the region that have legions? Thank you.
I would think Jim has an answer to that.
Well, I can't tell about other municipalities, but I can research. If they apply for permissive tax exemption, they're most likely get that 20% or whatever percentage of nonprofit is. It would be up to the council for the municipality, but if there are any other legions within the regional district and they apply, they would also have the consideration of the board if the board wishes to give it to them. They'd have every right to apply.
So I think that for clarification, the percentage that is deemed not for profit, who determines that? Is that in their application? They indicated that.
That would be in their application, and it would be verified by, I would assume, us or the region or the assessment authority.
Okay, did you get that, Director Olberg?
Please.
Okay, so that would be in their application, that percentage. Okay, CAO.
And in the end, Madam Chair, even if the board does grant an exception, the assessment authority will make the final decision. So if they don't agree with us, they'll just change it.
Oh, okay. Good point. Thank you. Yes, Jim?
That's a good example that the CEO just stated. For instance, last year, the Skaha Housing Society board passed a use of tax exemption.
Yes.
But it was denied because it wasn't completed. So as the CEO stated, they the assessment authority has ultimately the final say.
Okay, thank you. Director Holmes?
Thank you. In Summerland, we give an exemption to the Legion. I don't know off the top of my head what percentage that would be. They also apply for a grant and aid every year, which to run our Canada Day celebration. So they also get funding from the municipality that way. But I just wanted to ask a question regarding the churches and the United Church here. Are there any churches that have excess land that's not used for church purposes, which wouldn't then fit into a statutory exemption, but would rather have to be a permissive tax exemption? And that is that the case for Okanagan Falls? And does that explain that why they're on the list or not, or is that it doesn't apply here at all?
Go ahead, Jim.
Madam Chair, parking lots wouldn't be included, wouldn't be automatic. So that's probably very common that the parking lots aren't statutory. They could ask for a permissive tax exemption, but there'd have to be a good reason to show that that parking lot was nonprofit. So I've noted in some cases there are parking lots that are across the street, for instance, or next to the church, and the assessment authority does not give them an exemption.
Okay, thank you. So no parking lots. Director Johansson?
Thank you, Chair. Some information for Director Obrick. In Oliver, we do give an exemption to the Canadian Legion number 97, but it's only on the Class 8 improvements in the facility. And that's only a portion of the facility. And depending on the facility, it may or may not be larger or smaller depending on the facility. The lounge, for example, is not included in the classification. And in order for it to be meet the nonprofit organization public category, it has to have property use set aside for at least 150 days per year as a place of public worship and or a meeting all by nonprofit. 150 days cannot include activities and paid admission on the sale of consumption of alcohol. So the lounge does not qualify as part of that, and that's why there's a portion there, and that's what we do in Oliver anyway for the Legion, and the Elk is in the same boat.
Okay, thank you. What I'm seeing, I believe, are leftover hands from previous speakers. Johansson, Holmes, and Obrick, I think you have leftover hands up. Thank you. Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor to approve the list as amended. Was there any final question or comment before I call the question on this? And it is a weighted corporate vote with 2/3 majority required. Okay, I'll call, Director Monteith?
Sorry.
Or was that
sorry. Sorry. To the chair. Is there any merit in getting the balance of the information that the finance manager hasn't provided to us yet before we make a decision?
Sorry, I didn't hear it.
Sorry, the question is there any merit to needing, please repeat, Director Monteith?
To getting the information that we didn't receive prior to this meeting. Like I feel I haven't had enough time to digest it all, is what I'm trying to say.
Sure, go ahead, Jim.
There is no merit. It's what the amendment really has for the changes is the dollar amount for the Royal Canadian Legion changed, and the church was taken off of the list.
Because the church is on statutory. Yeah, so I think, Director Monteith, we see this every year. I think just now people are coming up with different suggestions as to how we should move forward. So this is something we do every year. And I think what is going to happen is there's not information that's changing who's on this list, but we need to have information come forward in the future so we can determine by policy if there's groups that we would want to exclude, such as golf courses. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm not.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Director Monteith. Okay, so the motion's on the floor is amended. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Hands can come down. Anybody opposed? Director Bowers opposed? Anybody else? Not seeing any. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, that takes us forward to CAO reports.
Nothing new from me, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Chair's report. So a couple things to note. I think the majority of the board participated in UBCM, which was very unique this year from what we're used to. I know some folks had difficulty with voting. That was a challenge, making the voting work. All in all, I think it went fairly well. I must say that it's certainly not as engaging to sit by yourself and watch a screen and not be able to talk to other directors and politicians and network. So hopefully next September we would be able to get together again. But you know, they did a really good job, in my opinion, of pulling that together and doing their best to provide us our opportunity to engage. My recommendation to them was that there was not enough time for resolutions and that they really should have had at least one more 3-hour block of resolutions, if not 2 more 3-hour blocks. We only got to NR 5 or 6, and there was many more, including our 3 resolutions. So there was no debate on ours, and that's always one of my favorite things, is to hear the debates and participate. So I did provide that feedback. If anybody would like to provide feedback, suggestions, I strongly encourage you to put those forward to UBCM. We also on Tuesday had our SILGA AGM, and I'm pleased to announce that the executive has 5 members from the Regional District Okanagan-Similkameen area, which is excellent to see that we have so much representation. So those members are Tony Boot, Judy Sentas, Spencer Coyne, myself, and Amy Grice from Oliver. Almost forgot about me. So we begin very soon with our SILGA meetings as we move forward with hopefully having a convention at the end of next April, but that may not happen. It may end up being the same format and pushed to September. I had a meeting with Director Obrick on Monday. He took me on a tour of Area D. We had some great discussions about his Okanagan Falls Economic Development Plan and moving forward, some ideas around what I like to do for Area E. I call it quick hits and medium and long-term plans and what you can do. So that was great to see. Certain areas, I told Director Obrick, by being a passenger instead of driving your car, you really get a better visual. So I hope that was helpful to Director Obrick. And last night, I know some of you joined in with the composting town hall. So we did a 1-hour composting town hall. That went very well. There were some excellent questions, and we still have the information online, and people have written in there. So you can see questions and answers that are being asked about the proposed composting facility. So that's everything from me. That takes us to director's motions, and I see we have a notice of motion from Director Gettins. And I'd like to go to Director Gettins on that, if she'd like to present that. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Christy has it written down as well, so I don't know if it'll show up on the screen. And sorry, there's somebody's coming into my yard and my dogs are going to bark, so just be careful. Anyways, the notice of motion that I want to put forward is that staff investigate the feasibility of hiring an Indigenous relations position to develop and maintain resilient working relationships with each of the South Okanagan-Similkameen Indian bands.
Okay, thank you very much. So that is in as a notice of motion. I have it written in front of me. Christy did provide that to me. And so that we would see directors come forward in 2 weeks as a motion, and that's where we can vote on it and have some debate regarding that. So thank you very much, Director Gettins, for bringing forward that notice of motion. And did any other directors have a notice of motion that they'd like to bring forward today? I'm not seeing any hands up. Okay, Thank you. That then takes us to board members' verbal updates. And I'm wondering if anybody has something they'd like to bring up from their area, any topics or updates? Director Holmes, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I think I the RDOS record today for the most leftover hands, so I apologize to everyone for that. I just want to also comment on UBC. I agree that I think they made the best of a really bad situation, and I provided the exact same feedback regarding the resolutions. I thought they had a great opportunity with it being online for them to extend the resolution sessions to actually get through them all for once. And so I was disappointed also that they didn't. And I think that's something UBCM really has to sort out, because never have they ever gotten through all the resolutions and one opportunity to do things differently, and they still didn't get through them all. So that I found that disappointing. Just in Summerland, I want to, if you missed Christmas in July in Summerland, you have a second opportunity in a couple weeks, October 13th, 15th. Another movie is going to be shot in downtown Summerland, and it's going to be a Christmas movie again. So all the decorations are going back up, and it's going to be a Hallmark movie this time. And so I just want to give a shout out to the Okanagan Film Commission for bringing that in. And it's incredible how active the filming is throughout the Okanagan has been this year. So just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Director Holmes. Did anybody else have an update they wish to bring forward? I'm not seeing any hands. If that's the case, then I'm looking for a motion to adjourn today's board meeting. Moved by Director Coyne Jr., seconded by Director Robinson. I'll call the question then. All in favor? Thank you very much. And is anybody opposed to adjournment? I think there's some left. I think Director Gibbs is a leftover hand. I don't think she's opposed. Okay, excellent. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you on the 15th. Have a good couple weeks.
How come there's such a delay?